the beginning of the great deception goes all the way back to Genesis chapter 3 in the garden, where the serpent said unto the woman, Ye shall not surely die, for God doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. Essentially, you see the devil making a couple of promises, which are very interesting if you really think about them. He's talking about the promise of immortality. They already were. Death didn't come until after that, right? He's talking about illumination. Your eyes shall be open. You have greater understanding. Well, how much more illumination and understanding do you need than walking with God? Hey, God, how did that happen? Well, let me tell you, Adam. Right? Lie. Becoming like gods. I think there's the big one right there. You too could be God. Why just serve God, right? When you could be God. That's the big lie, I think. Let's look a little deeper here. The pharaohs thought they were gods. The Caesars thought they were gods. Kings thought they were gods all through ancient cultures. What about presidents? Go to Washington, D.C., and walk into the womb of Isis, because that's what it is, the Capitol Dome, right across from the phallic symbol of Osiris, right across the way. Osiris' missing piece. Walk into the womb of Isis and look up in our Christian-founded country, right? And you see the apotheosis of George Washington, surrounded by 72 upside-down stars that we call, what? Pentagrams, right? Binding utilities throughout the occult. So we've got George depicted up there, supposedly in heaven, right? He's sitting there in a throne, there in heaven. You might think that if this really was a Christian nation in that whole thing, that you might see, maybe Jesus up there, you see Moses or see some of the angels or something, right? Christian nation? No, that's not what you see. You see Neptune up there. You see Vulcan. You see Mercury. And our founding fathers taking notes from the messenger of the gods in our Christian country. All right? You may or may not have seen this picture before. This had to be moved indoors because people started complaining about it, but there was a statue that had been commissioned about George Washington as a god. Which god? Zeus. That's a representation of the Temple of Zeus, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, made of gold and ivory. George Zeus. And Baphomet, too, by the way. Same pose as the cult symbol for Baphomet. And not to be outdone, that looks awful lot like something you would see in Greece, doesn't it? In Athens, little people, big god sitting in a chair. And after he died, a whole bunch of postcards and commissioned paintings and stuff started coming out for the apotheosis of Abraham Lincoln, with Lady Liberty there with the hat of Mithra. Christian nation. And just in case you're questioning, right above his head, what does that say? In this temple. What are temples for? Worship. Gods. Washington, D.C. Well, remember what Solomon said? What has been done, will be again. What about this guy? Isn't it amazing how so many photo ops of this guy show up with a halo around his head? He seems to always be positioned such that whatever is behind him forms the media, like we heard in some of the other sessions, is actively promoting this guy as like a Messiah type figure. You see it all the time. Well, what's interesting is he was making his rounds and campaigning, and he was in Germany. He was really obsessed with the altar of Zeus, which, oh, by the way, in Revelation chapter 2 is referred to in Pergamum as the seat of Satan. Hitler loved it too. This is in the Berlin Museum. He loved it so much that he made a replica of it for his acceptance speech in Denver, Colorado, on top of a pyramid as the cap. His acceptance speech in Denver, Colorado. Do some research on the Denver International Airport if you really want to go down a rabbit trail. Okay? Acceptance speech in front of the altar of Satan, the altar of Zeus, temple, right? 2008, 2009 was a very interesting time period in this country. This guy right here, as Obama's making his rounds, this guy was making his rounds as well, Anubis. He showed up in America in October 2008, just before Obama was placed, voted into office. Anubis hung around, going around the country, getting photo ops in front of the equally pagan Statue of Liberty. This was in March of 2010. And then Anubis camped out in Denver International Airport from June 29th, 2010 to January 9th, 2011, this year. Interesting thing about Anubis, he was the god of the underworld until Osiris showed up, usurped his authority, became the new god of the underworld, but he was still a handy guy to keep around because he was in charge of the mummification, to make sure mummification was all about preserving the dead for resurrection, guys. And when you went down to Hades, he was the guy that quizzed you to decide which direction you go. Okay? Anubis, traveling around the country with our buddy Obama. Same year, Obama goes to Egypt, and in Cairo, all the vendors there were creating metal plaques like this one right here to sell. They were selling these metal plaques that said, Obama, the new Tutankhamun of the world. Tutankhamun, King Tut. King Tut was the son of Akhenaten, which was a very interesting character indeed. But one of the things Akhenaten did was he got rid of all the old gods of Egypt and instituted a monotheistic religion of one god. King Tut showed up, said, yeah, forget everything my dad did, I'm going to reinstitute and bring back the worship of the old gods. King Tut brought back the worship of the old gods. King Tut was a pharaoh who thought himself as a god. Obama, the new King Tut of the world? Makes you think, unless we forget, the man of peace, right? What the heck did the guy do? Nobody knew anything about him a couple of years ago. Goes to Norway to receive the Nobel Peace Prize. And while he's in Norway doing that, this thing shows up in the sky over Norway. Now, of course, everybody said, it's a failed missile. But does that look like a missile? First of all, if there are failed intercontinental ballistic missiles going on over cities, that's a big problem too, but come on, failed missile. That's like back in the 50s, everything was a weather balloon. Now everything's a failed missile. Come on. That's an interdimensional portal, in my opinion. I think demons are coming through. So, like a wormhole. Now, I do not believe that Obama is the Antichrist. I don't believe that. But I do believe he's probably acting more like a John the Baptist type character, preparing the way. He is definitely preparing the way, in my opinion. So if he's not the Antichrist, who is the Antichrist? Well, there's a bunch of descriptions of the Antichrist we can look at in Scripture. Here's a few things that pulled out here. The one, this is an interesting phrase. The Antichrist is known as the one who was and is not and yet shall be. The beginning of Revelation starts off talking about Jesus as what? The one who was and is to come. Start talking about the Antichrist, the one who was and is not and yet shall be. He's empowered by Satan. He recovers from a mortal head wound. He is called the Beast. The Beast has or had 7 heads. He's associated with the desert and secret chambers. We'll talk about that in a minute. The whole world worships him. He sets himself up as king of the New World Order. He thinks of himself as a god. He wages war against God. His number is 666, and he is cast alive into the lake of fire. I believe the answer can be found in these 4 scriptures right here. Now, in the Old Testament, there's a lot of scriptures talking about the Assyrian. There's a lot of scriptures in the Old Testament talking about the end-time tyrant as the Assyrian. Keep that in mind. Revelation chapter 17 talks about the 7 heads of the beast. Go ahead and read that there. The beast that you saw was and is not and will ascend out of the bottomless pit. Where does the beast come from? The bottomless pit. And he will go to perdition. And those who dwell on the earth will marvel, whose names are not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they see the beast that was and is not and yet is. Here is the mind which has wisdom. In other words, think about this, guys. Okay? Think about it. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. There are also 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is, and the other has not yet come. And when he comes, he must continue a short time. The beast that was and is not is himself also the eighth, and is of the seven, and is going to perdition. There's your guardrails. So it's not Obama, it's not the tyrants in Iran, it's got to fit this. So who are the seven heads?